Seo Yujin, a secretary at HN Construction, reflects on how most people's problems start with money. If not for her father's debt, her life, though poor, would have remained normal, and she would have never crossed paths with such a dangerous beast. Meanwhile, the company's president unexpectedly asks about the return of Jin Taeoh. Seo, unfamiliar with the name, watches as the president's expression darkens. She soon learns that Jin Taeoh is none other than the president's younger brother. However, she struggles to understand why the president appears so unhappy about his return. In the end, she concludes that Taeoh must be a troublemaker. There is a common belief that every household has at least one troublesome child. Jin Taeoh, the president-director of HN Construction, understands this well. However, she finds it too vague to describe her younger brother as just a troublemaker. She is then informed that executive director Yoon of Biggs has come around. The news annoys her. How can someone be so shameless after being caught stealing company money? Still, she sets the thought aside, knowing her brother's return will bring plenty of trouble. Manager Kim hesitantly asks if he has gotten into any trouble. She sighs, admitting that if he were only troublesome, things would be much simpler. Jin Taeoh squanders their parents' properties and indulges in women to the point of losing control, causing a social stir. If he were just an ordinary person, his actions might have been overlooked. However, to put it bluntly, he is a troublemaker whose focus seems slightly unhinged. In his childhood, he was normal and quiet, but when he was 10, his sister, the president, began noticing something strange about him. One day, looking like a typical rich kid, he was approached by bullies near his school. When one of them tried to scare him, he bit the boy so hard that it left an impression. She wonders what triggered him that day, then affirms that situations like this often start with harm caused by someone else. Was it his survival instinct kicking in? From that moment on, nobody could lay a hand on him. There was a time their father stopped him right at the front door to correct his bad habits. That day, the wind was at its strongest and coldest. In the end, the Battle of Pride lasted exactly 5 hours and 17 minutes before her brother collapsed. After recovering, he made an unexpected decision. He announced that he was enlisting. Without further explanation, he volunteered to join the UDT as a non-commissioned officer and followed the path to the army without a word to his family. Their family tried to change him, but it was all in vain. He was simply born that way. After 3 years, Jin Taeoh is returning to Korea. He had been sent to a conflict zone, one that is notoriously difficult for most people to be deployed to. His sister, however, sighs at the news, already thinking ahead. She shifts her attention to another matter and asks Manager Kim who handled Executive Director Yoon. He replies that Secretary Seo did. According to him, she brought Yoon coffee and accompanied him out right away, proving once again that she is skilled at dealing with such situations. Despite the conversation, the president remains preoccupied with her brother's return. She knows she can't stop him, so she decides to prepare instead. If preventing him from coming back isn't an option, she needs to establish some form of control. With that in mind, she requests the presence of Secretary Seo Yujin. When Seo arrives, the president gets straight to the point. She informs her that the down payment is 50 million won, separate from her salary. Then, she asks if 10 million won per month is too little. She explains that her younger brother is being discharged from the army after 5 years. Though he has been back in Korea for 3 years, she believes he may need some assistance. The task isn't too different from Seo's current job. She will simply need to manage his schedule, keep up with her usual work while he is out, and report back to the president once a day. The arrangement is set to last for 3 months at most. The president tells Seo that once her brother returns, she will transfer her to the planning office. Wanting to confirm, she asks if that was where she wanted to go. Seo agrees, but wonders why she is being assigned such a simple task. When she asks, the president reveals her true intention. She wants her to keep an eye on him and ensure he doesn't get into trouble. Curious, she asks for more clarification. The president explains that even if he does cause trouble, she must make sure he doesn't get caught. As long as he stays out of the media, it's fine. If he gets exposed, HN Group's stock price will plummet, and their family will become the center of gossip. With that, she directly asks for her thoughts. Seo pauses, wondering what kind of person he is. Instead of answering immediately, she questions why she was chosen for this role when there are many others more qualified. Glancing at manager Kim, she even points him out as a better candidate. However, the president silently considers the situation, already knowing the real reason. Her brother doesn't hit women or children. That is how Secretary Seo Yujin ends up here today. As she waits at the airport, she reminds herself that money is important and that she needs it. She recalls the president's words, assuring her that she would recognize him at first glance. However, she finds it hard to believe. Because of her father's debt, there wasn't a single part-time job she didn't try while growing up. From those experiences, she developed a skill that would become her greatest asset: her sharp instincts. As a dedicated employee who prides herself on uncovering the truth, this ability is her strongest weapon. The moment she sees him, her instincts sound the alarm. Everything in her tells her to stay away from the man standing before her. However, when he asks if she is Seo Yujin, she responds calmly, greeting him politely before informing him that the car is in the garage and offering to guide him there. As he walks past, he seems taken aback, almost in disbelief that she is a woman. Meanwhile, she takes note of something else. His aura feels dangerous. In the car, Seo asks where they should go since he hasn't decided on a place to live yet. He tells her to head to the Central Hotel. A few seconds later, he asks if she is the watchtower his sister set up to keep an eye on him. She answers jokingly before telling him to think of her as a secretary who handles things for him. He then asks if she has heard the rumor that he doesn't hit women and children. Without waiting for a response, he adds that his thoughts changed 3 years ago after encountering women and children hiding deadly weapons under skirts and fruit baskets. Seo silently acknowledges that nothing in this world comes for free. She realizes she was blinded by the money offered and now finds herself in this situation. His voice snaps her out of her thoughts as he asks what she thinks. Ignoring the question, she focuses on his gaze, which feels unsettling. It's as if her life is in his hands, like a wild beast contemplating whether to attack. She wonders if taming him in the next 3 months is even possible, but more importantly, she questions if she will survive. After a while, they arrive at the Central Hotel, where Kim Il-deok, the hotel manager, welcomes Seo Taeoh. He mentions that he would have come to meet him if he had known about his arrival earlier. Ignoring the comment, Taeoh asks if the old man isn't tired of working at the hotel his entire life. Kim Il-deok responds with gratitude, explaining that the hotel owner was considerate enough to let him continue working even after reaching retirement age last year. When he says something else, Taeoh laughs it off before asking how long he thinks he will stay this time. He casually replies that he has been discharged from the military. The old man shakes his hand, expressing happiness to see him again, and admits that he missed him. Taeoh then instructs him to prepare a room, saying he will be staying for a while. The old man agrees without hesitation. Meanwhile, Seo Yujin's attention shifts to a man arguing with the receptionist. He demands to know if she recognizes him and insists he doesn't need to explain anything. She should simply call the manager immediately. Watching the scene unfold, she wonders if people everywhere are this entitled and silently wishes the manager good luck. Kim Il-deok enters, and the man immediately questions if he is the manager before claiming to know exactly who he is. Without hesitation, he orders him to prepare the top-floor suite right away. The old man politely informs him that the room has already been checked in and offers the suite below instead, but the man refuses to back down, insisting that he should be given the most expensive room. The woman accompanying the man stands quietly as the argument continues. Seo Yujin watches, feeling that his face looks familiar. The old man does his best to persuade him, but things seem to be escalating. Taeoh, noticing the situation, decides to step in. Seeing his expression, Seo suddenly recalls the president's warning. It would be enough if he simply stayed out of the media. Realizing what he's about to do, she exclaims in alarm and quickly moves to stop him. Approaching the man first, she politely asks for a moment. Curious about her identity, he listens as she confidently addresses him by name, confirming that he is Director Lee Jung-jin from Hank Corporation. When he affirms, she introduces herself as reporter Kim Ji-young from Everyday News. Without hesitation, she starts recording, expressing what an honor it is to meet him here. Then she brings up a drug scandal article, subtly mentioning that certain drug users tend to be weak. Casually, she adds that it's a relief she can get an exclusive interview with him today. Visibly uncomfortable, he asks her to put the phone away, but she presses on, reminding him that he is still on probation. His companion sighs in frustration, announcing that she's leaving before walking away. Realizing the situation has turned against him, he quickly mutters that the hotel has lost a big spender before running after her. Seo lets out a relieved sigh, but Taeoh isn't pleased. He warns her not to interfere in his matters without permission, making it clear that he doesn't want anyone meddling in his business. Without hesitation, she responds that she would love to stay out of it, but she's getting paid to do this. He stares at her silently, seemingly caught off guard. Before he can say anything else, the manager approaches, apologizing for the commotion and offering to escort them upstairs. Seo sighs again, realizing how close that was. She was so nervous that, for a moment, she thought she might not make it out of the situation. When Seo arrives home, she collapses onto her bed, exhausted. If she had the choice, she would quit. But money is the issue. If she can cover up Jin Taeoh's unlawful deeds for just 3 months, she will receive 100 million won. There's no way she can say no. Staring at her family photo, she reflects on her past. They were never wealthy, but they were happy. However, the debt her father left behind was overwhelming. Her mother had to wash dishes day and night, while she juggled studying and part-time jobs without a break. No matter how hard she worked, the debt never seemed to shrink. Now, all she wants is to endure these 3 months and pay off at least 10% of what her father owed. Encouraging herself that she can do it, she slowly drifts off to sleep. Early in the morning, her phone rings. It's the president. She quickly answers, greeting her formally. Without wasting time, the president says it's nothing serious, but asks if she would like to visit Taeoh's room. She then casually mentions that he caused trouble in the hotel lounge the previous night. Seo concludes that having a drink to adjust to jet lag is understandable, but she assumes Taeoh must have gotten into an argument with a drunk guest. However, the real issue is that the other person is now set to undergo surgery in 12 weeks. The president reassures her that the other person started the fight and that there were many witnesses, so covering it up won't be a problem. Then, she makes another request. The suite where Taeoh is staying has multiple rooms, so she asks if Seo can stay with him from now on. Close surveillance, 24 hours a day. As an incentive, she offers to add 10 million won per month to her salary. Seo has always survived by adapting to her environment and following her superior's orders. She understands very well whose pocket her salary comes from, so she decides to comply this time as well. But she also knows there will be moments when she gets frustrated. Arriving at his room, she repeatedly presses the doorbell, growing impatient. After a few minutes with no response, she finally yells for him to open the door. However, a receptionist approaches and politely informs her that the guest left earlier for a workout and is now at the second-floor cafe. Realizing why no one answered, she feels a wave of embarrassment. To make matters worse, the receptionist asks her to lower her voice so as not to disturb the other guests. On the second floor, Taeoh sits with a drink while the manager informs him that everything he requested has been prepared. He adds that Taeoh should feel free to ask if he needs anything else. Seo walks up to them, and the manager acknowledges her presence. She greets them both before turning her attention to Taeoh. With a hint of irritation, she wonders if he enjoys making people run around in the morning while he relaxes with his coffee. She reminds him that he should inform her of his whereabouts, but he casually responds that he didn't realize they were that close. Hiding her frustration, she gets to the point. She tells him she heard about the small problem from last night and informs him that the president has now ordered her to stay with him 24 hours a day. He immediately reminds her of what he said the day before. He doesn't want anyone interfering with his business. As she starts to explain, he cuts her off and bluntly asks if she's doing this for money. She silently acknowledges that he's the reason for this situation, before replying that she doesn't like it either. However, as a mere employee, she has no choice but to follow the president's orders. She adds that it feels unfair since she still has to handle her usual work on top of this. He asks if she gets paid, and after pausing for a moment, she admits that she does. In her mind, she knows one wrong move could ruin everything, so of course she has to be compensated. Then she adds that the pay isn't even that high, considering how dangerous this job is. She thinks she should receive additional compensation. He listens, then smirks slightly. If that's the case, he tells her, she should slowly prove to him that he needs to keep her by his side, because he isn't generous enough to let someone stay around him for free. She accepts, though it doesn't make sense to her, and wonders why her life is so exhausting. Inside the room, she looks around in surprise, questioning how much everything costs. Trying to make conversation, she jokingly compares his outfit to that of a Grim Reaper but immediately backtracks, admitting that's not what she meant. He dismisses it, telling her to forget it. When he mentions heading to One Square shopping mall, she finds it odd, thinking that Taeoh and shopping malls don't go together at all. Upon arrival, she notes that there are plenty of free parking spots since it's a weekday, but he insists they park on the 4th basement floor. She silently acknowledges that if things already feel complicated for her, it must be even more difficult for him to live in Korea. However, he insists on Area C, so she complies. Inside the elevator, she casually asks about his height before stating hers. She then tells him that since they have to live together, he should at least be more considerate. Instead of responding, he instructs her to press the button. She hesitates, wondering if she passed HN's tough entrance examination just to be reduced to pressing elevator buttons. With mild irritation, she asks if he has tuberculosis, explaining that she's only asking because he made her press the button when he was closer to it. Instead of giving a direct answer, he starts narrating something from his UDT training. She listens, trying to figure out if this is his way of saying he doesn't have tuberculosis, but she questions why he's even bringing it up. He reminds her that she's supposed to prove that he needs her. Then, as if dismissing the idea entirely, he adds that he doesn't see anything else she's useful for besides driving or pressing an elevator button. She says nothing, but in her mind, she vows that one day she'll bring him to his knees. As she follows him, she asks where they are heading, but he doesn't respond. After a while, she questions if he's looking for something since he has been staring at the ceiling, walls, and floor for quite some time. Jokingly, she tells him that she once had a part-time job searching for cats, so she can help him out if needed. Ignoring her remark, he instead brings up her desire to prove her usefulness. He tells her to imagine she's a woman in her 20s. Offended, she yells that she is in her 20s, though she'll be 30 next year. Undeterred, he continues, describing a scenario. A woman parks her car in the underground lot on a Saturday, takes the elevator to the 1st floor, and then disappears. Her car remains in the same spot for a week, and she is never seen again on any of the first 4 floors. Thinking it through, she asks what the woman was wearing that day and, out of curiosity, whether he's ever been in a relationship before. Then, piecing the clues together, she considers the possibility that the woman was supposed to meet someone that day, likely at the restaurant and cafe on the 6th floor. She concludes that the woman must have gotten off on the 1st floor because she arrived earlier than planned and took the escalator to browse the shops before heading up. She doesn't find this unusual, as many women do the same. She then asks again about the woman's outfit, suspecting that the person she was meeting might have been a man. After all, a dinner and a movie are a classic date choice. When he points to the rooftop parking lot on a list, she offers an explanation. He listens for a while before conceding that she has a point, if there was something the woman actually wanted to see up there. Without warning, he suddenly remarks that it's annoying to have her following him around like goldfish poop, but he supposes it's fine to take her along for now. Being compared to goldfish poop instantly riles her up. Nevertheless, she hurries after him. As they walk, she overhears people murmuring about Taeoh's handsomeness. She silently acknowledges that he is good-looking, but reminds herself that appearances can be deceiving. Now standing outside, she comments on the CCTV blind spots and the heavy foot traffic on weekends. Suddenly, a yellow car speeds past them, far too close for comfort. In shock, she questions why someone would drive so recklessly, then glances at Taeoh, amazed that he didn't even flinch. He ignores her reaction and, without breaking stride, informs her that he's going to check the exit. He instructs her to head down to the parking lot, bring the car, and meet him at the main entrance. Inside the car, she grumbles about the outrageous parking fee, calling it daylight robbery. Just then, she spots the same yellow car that nearly hit her earlier. Her eyes shift to the man standing beside it, and she immediately recognizes him. Someone who has always been inconsiderate of others. Before she can process it further, she sees Taeoh walking straight toward the man. Her breath catches as the guy flicks his cigarette at him, and she gasps, instantly recognizing the trouble brewing. Panic surges through her as she wonders, of all the people on this planet, why does it have to be Taeoh? She knows she has to stop him, before things spiral out of control. Taeoh picks up the discarded cigarette, meeting the man's defiant gaze. Without hesitation, he flicks it into the guy's car. The man erupts, throwing insults at him, but Taeoh remains unfazed. Instead, he calmly asks if he was never taught to throw trash in a trash can. Watching the scene unfold, Seo Yujin thinks it would have been best to stay out of this mess. The man, now furious, raises his fist, intending to punch Taeoh. But before he can land a hit, Taeoh swiftly intercepts, gripping his wrist with ease. Rather than backing down, the man continues his tirade, but Taeoh doesn't let go. The tension lingers until finally the man mutters an apology, and Taeoh releases him. Back in the car, Seo Yujin sighs, affirming that people like him deserve a taste of their own medicine, though handling it so openly in broad daylight is questionable. Then it strikes her. I only warned him not to do these things in public. I never said anything about not causing trouble at all. She wonders if that small distinction will come back to haunt her. Pushing the thought aside, she shifts focus to their plans. Curious, she asks if there's anything else on the schedule, reminding him that her 24-hour surveillance starts today. She also mentions needing to retrieve her luggage from home. Taeoh doesn't respond. Instead, he gets out of the car without a word. Watching him walk away, she can only hope he stays out of trouble until she gets back. With a sigh, she promises to bring something delicious meal when she returns. On her way back to the hotel, Seo Yujin grumbles about the weight of her luggage and how her mother delayed her. She recalls the skeptical look on her mother's face when she asked why her job required her to move. No matter how much she tried to explain, her mother remained unconvinced. Still lost in thought, she suddenly hears President Jin call her name. Looking up, she sees the woman seated nearby, motioning for her to sit. As she takes a seat, the president casually remarks that she and Taeoh seem to have gotten close, especially since she even brought him a meal pack. Seo Yujin inwardly winces, thinking the food was terrible, but forces a laugh and asks why the president is here. Ignoring her question, President Jin observes her reaction, then asks why she thinks her brother returned to Korea. Seo Yujin stiffens. Noticing her hesitation, the president presses further, asking if Taeoh mentioned anything. She insists there must be a reason behind his return. Seo Yujin considers her words carefully before responding, as if he would tell a stranger something he hasn't even told his family. The president seems to accept that logic, nodding slightly. However, Seo Yujin hesitates before adding that it seems like Taeoh is looking for someone, but she doesn't really have any details. The president studies her for a moment before shifting topics. Seo Yujin hands over a receipt, asking if the company can cover the expense. She blinks in surprise as President Jin hands her a personal credit card. She hesitates before asking what it's for. The president explains that it's for any necessary expenses and reassures her that since it's not a company card, she can use it freely, even for small things like snacks and coffee. Grateful, she thanks her and jokingly mentions that she had considered requesting danger and health examination fees for constantly following Taeoh around. But now, with this card, she doesn't have to worry about that anymore. Amused, the president assures her that if things go well, she will compensate her for that as well. She grins and declares that she will work herself to the bone for this company. The president raises an eyebrow at her words but doesn't press further. Instead, she reminds her not to mention this meeting to Taeoh. She then asks her to relay a message that their father is quite angry since Taeoh hasn't come home yet and he should visit soon. Seo Yujin nods, promising to let him know before excusing herself. As she leaves, she grips the card tightly, feeling a newfound sense of security. However, a thought lingers in her mind. The day Tayo arrived, he went straight to the hotel without visiting his family. Who is the first person he needs to find? Recalling his earlier words, asking her to assume she was a woman in her 20s, she wonders if he is searching for his girlfriend. Seo Yujin walks into the suite and announces her return. As she approaches, she notices the footage playing on his computer and asks if it isn't from the one square rooftop parking lot's CCTV. Instead of answering, Tayo complains that she told him not to eat, but only brought back chicken. She doesn't see the problem and even considers it generous, explaining that she only indulges in it on payday. He takes a bite and admits that it isn't bad. Watching him eat, she teases that he must have missed Korean chicken. He asks if she has ever been outside Korea, and she responds that she hasn't. Now, seeing him eat both drumsticks, she thinks he's being too selfish. When he asks if she doesn't like chicken breast, she explains that she prefers to save the best for last. He counters that he likes taking the best first. She isn't happy about it, but lets it slide, reminding herself that she has the president's card. He raises an eyebrow and asks if she even chews before talking, because he couldn't understand her last words. She jokes to annoy him before moving closer to the screen and asking if he found the car. Staring at the footage, she notes that the quality is terrible, but sees clips from different angles. While they can't make out the man's face, the woman's face is clear. He confirms that she is the person he is looking for. Yujin observes that the woman doesn't seem to have been forced into the car and notices that it's a rental. Curious, she asks who the woman is, offering to help if possible. Then he reveals that her name is Lee Jong-yeon, a college student who went missing a week ago. Her parents searched everywhere and eventually found her car parked at one square. The last footage of her shows her exiting the first-floor elevator. Since Tayo had just been discharged at the time and was acquainted with her father, the man asked him to find his daughter. She questions whether the police were involved, but he explains that the family couldn't afford to take any chances and didn't want to blow the situation out of proportion. She wonders what kind of people would avoid the authorities when their daughter is missing. However, he points out that since Lee Jong-yeon voluntarily got into the car, there won't be any police intervention from now on. He suddenly decides to get something more to eat, complaining that the chicken wasn't enough. Turning to her, he suggests they go together and asks if she's in the mood for something spicy. Late at night, Seo Yujin feels thirsty and decides to get some water. She wonders how many bottles are left in the fridge and makes a mental note to buy more the next day. As she steps out, she spots Tayo sitting with a drink in hand. She hesitates, debating whether to pretend she doesn't see him. Curious, she asks if he's having trouble sleeping. He responds that if he doesn't do anything physically demanding during the day, he only sleeps for 3 to 4 hours, and today, he did nothing. She muses that this might explain his personality, recalling that people who sleep well tend to be more active. When he stares at her, she quickly looks away and walks toward the window. Gazing outside, she remarks that despite the late hour, people are still awake. Meanwhile, Taeoh thinks Korea is too quiet. He notes that the sounds of passing cars, motorcycles, a cat in heat, and even the wind are easily blocked by soundproof walls. She wonders where isn't quiet and what kind of sounds he used to hear at night. Perhaps the sounds of weapons. She brings him some tea, suggesting it's better for insomnia than alcohol, but he refuses. Puzzled, she asks what else is keeping him awake. When he continues to ignore the tea, she insists, but he simply stares at her. Concerned, she asks if he took any pills. Tayo coldly asks where she thinks he was all this time, and what would happen if he got disoriented from the pills and missed something important. Yawning, she decides to head to bed, leaving him to his thoughts. As she walks away, he watches her, finding her an amusing woman. The next day, they visit the college where Secretary Seo graduated. As she looks around, she notes that the place hasn't changed at all. Tayo reminds her of what he told her on their way there. When she asks for more context, he simply tells her to follow his instructions. She wonders if he was a commanding officer in the military, but he ignores the comment and instead repeats his earlier instructions because he doesn't trust her to remember. He tells her to gather information about Miss Lee's relationships from her friends while making sure they don't find out she is missing. Seo assures him not to worry, boasting that she was in the drama club for 3 years. She approaches a girl and they start reminiscing about her time in the drama club. When the girl notices Taeoh, she immediately comments on how handsome he is and expresses interest in talking to him. Seo, however, thinks to herself that they may have bright futures, but their taste in men is questionable. Later, she reports back to Taeoh, explaining that she spoke to all of Miss Lee's close friends, but none of them mentioned her having a boyfriend. However, they did say she started acting strangely about a month ago. She was always busy, constantly checking her phone during lectures, and seemed distracted. Seo then shows Taeoh the social media account she managed to find. Previously, Miss Lee used to post videos of her piano practice, but about a month ago, her content changed. Seo points out a post showing movie tickets, suggesting that she might have gone on a date. Taeoh takes a look and immediately tells her that they should head back to the car. They head to his home, and as they enter the parking lot, Secretary Seo notes that it's bigger than her entire house. She isn't happy that Taeoh told her to wait in the car, especially since he mentioned he would take up to 1 or 2 hours inside. She mutters that she wouldn't even eat much if that's what he's worried about. Not long after, the president drives in. Stepping out of her car, she spots Secretary Seo and immediately asks if Taeoh is inside. When Seo confirms it, the president sighs in frustration, saying the timing is terrible, considering he has only been there for 30 minutes. Despite this, she tells Seo to come inside with her. Inside, they find Taeoh, and the president questions whether he isn't staying for dinner, seeing that he's already preparing to leave. He replies that he only came to give his greetings. She expresses her disappointment, saying it makes her sad that he refuses to spend time with them. He simply responds that he's busy, then reminds her to pay more attention to their father's health, mentioning that his blood pressure seemed to rise faster than the last time he saw him. The president, about to point out whose fault that is cut off when Taeoh announces that he's leaving. Secretary Seo also bids her farewell. Back in the suite, Taeoh takes out a document. It's Miss Lee's credit card statement. Seo glances at it and notes that her spending patterns seem fairly consistent, except for 3 new expenses that started appearing a month ago: department store purchases, visits to a nail art shop, and trips to a car center. Seo concludes that Miss Lee's friends don't know her boyfriend because he likely isn't a student at their school. She suggests that she might have met the man at either the department store or the car center. He, however, believes the car center is more significant. He then asks her to check if Miss Lee visited the car center again within the last 3 days. Seo looks through the records and finds that she did, along with a restaurant or cafe, though she didn't spend much money there. She then notes that her social media content changed after those visits. She finds it strange that her friends were supposedly paying for her every time, leading her to conclude that there was a man involved. A man she wanted to look good for. Given the expenses, he must be an official worker who could afford to pay for her, yet he doesn't have a car of his own, hence why he used a rental car. He acknowledges that she has a point, and Seo feels pleased to hear it. She asks if he's going out for dinner and then suggests they go together, joking that she doesn't want his precious fingers pressing an elevator button. After dinner, she lies on the couch and he approaches, questioning what she's doing there. She turns to stare at him and he asks why she left her perfectly fine bed to sleep on the couch. She responds that it was too quiet and she couldn't fall asleep. He asks again, as if unconvinced, and she reminds him that she already told him to drink tea instead of alcohol. She then tells him goodnight and turns away. Instead of leaving, he sits down next to her. Early in the morning, she asks if he had a good night's rest. He responds that his face doesn't seem like something she's actually curious about. Still, she admits that seeing how refreshed he looks, he must have slept well. He confirms that he slept deeply for 4 hours for the first time in a while. She wonders how he managed to sleep in his room after complaining that it was too quiet. He explains that she didn't even notice when he left to exercise and returned. Meanwhile, she complains that her shoulders and back hurt from sleeping on the sofa. He asks if she's joining him for breakfast, and she agrees. Later, she gets out of the car, and a man approaches, asking how he can help. She tells him she wants to change her engine oil. The man comments that she has a nice-looking car. She responds that it's nice, but, unfortunately, a company car. He laughs and assures her that he'll fix it in a minute. She casually mentions that she saw a young man working here before, but it seems he isn't around today. The man asks if she's talking about Mr. Young. She nods, saying that he had promised her better service on her next visit, but now he's not here. The man sighs and explains that Mr. Young hasn't been around for 10 days now. He tried asking him to work one more day, but Young refused and ended the call. It's been frustrating because he hasn't had time to hire a new employee yet. She sympathizes, noting that it must be tough working alone. Just then, she gasps as she spots Taeoh rummaging through the man's cabinet. She wonders what he's looking for and if he'll get caught. The man, unaware, comments that it seems like she recently changed her engine oil. She quickly walks toward him, denying it, saying the car rattles every time she comes to a stop. He decides to examine it further, suggesting the problem might not be with the oil. She thanks him, while stealing glances at Taeoh, hoping he doesn't get noticed. On their way, she questions Taeoh about checking someone's workplace without permission, pointing out that they could have been caught if not for the distraction she created. He ignores her concerns and instead informs her that they've arrived at Mr. Young In-ho's address as listed on his resume from the car center. She hesitates, wondering if they should really barge into his home like this. Since Miss Lee willingly entered the car, they could have eloped for love. Is it really necessary to force her out of hiding? She then states her personal rule. She doesn't interfere in other people's relationships. Taeoh dismisses her reasoning, saying that none of that is his concern. He's only fulfilling a favor someone asked of him. Then, addressing her as the drama club's promising talent, he tells her that her role is more crucial than she thinks. She asks what he expects her to do. He lays out 3 options: break through the front door, use a rope to descend from the rooftop and enter through the veranda, or use her acting skills to get him to open the door himself. Without hesitation, she picks the 3rd option but questions why it has to be her. He explains that the target will be less suspicious if it's a woman. She starts to argue, but he's already walking away, slipping on gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. Standing in front of the door, she wonders if anyone is inside. Taeoh assures her that he saw a shadow moving earlier. Taking a deep breath, she knocks and announces that she lives in the apartment below. She claims there's water dripping from her ceiling and suspects that his sink might have burst. There's silence from inside. She knocks again, asking if anyone is home. When she still gets no response, she warns that she'll have to involve the police if he's intentionally ignoring her. A moment later, the door cracks open slightly and Jung peeks out. His expression is wary as he asks if she needs something. She recognizes him from the resume and repeats her explanation about the leaking water. Then she asks how he plans to fix it. Jung frowns and says that it's not possible. She tries to persuade him, then questions if he's implying that she's lying. He quickly denies it, explaining that the apartment below belongs to 2 elderly grandparents. Then he demands to know who she really is. Her mind races for an excuse. Thinking quickly, she claims to be their granddaughter, visiting for a few days while job hunting. But she brushes that aside as unimportant, suggesting that they go downstairs together to check, so he won't be able to change his story later. Jung sighs and tries to dismiss her, saying she should handle it herself and he'll cover the cost. But she insists, adding that she has seen people pull this kind of trick before. Under pressure, he finally agrees and opens the door to step out. At that moment, Taeoh swiftly enters the apartment. Jung startles in fear and demands to know who he is. Taeoh ignores the question and instructs Seo to lock the front door and veranda window. She complies without hesitation. Taeoh turns to Jung and asks where Miss Lee is. Jung feigns ignorance, questioning how he's supposed to know. He tries to act tough, but Taeoh doesn't react. Instead, he points out that Jung didn't ask who Miss Lee was. That alone proves that he already knows something. Jung's face stiffens. Taeoh doesn't hold back, pressing him harder for answers. Meanwhile, Seo glances around the room. Despite all the noise, there's no sign of Miss Lee coming out, which makes her uneasy. She warns Taeoh to stop, reminding him that if he goes too far, he might end up in the local news. She turns to leave, but suddenly freezes. Her breath catches in her throat as she spots something through a slightly open door. Inside, Miss Lee is there. Helpless, her condition shocking. A surge of anger flares within Seo. Taeoh and Seo enter the room and quickly free Miss Lee. As Taeoh lifts her, Seo asks what will happen to Young. Taeoh responds that he won't need to take action himself. Young's life will be troublesome from now on. Young scrambles to his feet, insisting that Miss Lee kept complaining about her strict father and how suffocating her home was. He claims he let her stay with him out of goodwill and even took care of her. Seo cuts him off, furious. She demands to know why he did something like this and concludes that he deserves a beating. They take Miss Lee to an emergency medical center. Not long after, her father arrives. Taeoh greets him right away, but the man dismisses the formality, stating that Taeoh has already been discharged and should feel at ease. Taeoh informs him that his daughter is inside and that he can go see her. The man grabs his arm without a word, then walks toward the hospital ward in heavy silence. After the day's activities, Secretary Seo lies down to rest. She soon gets up and questions what's wrong. When Taeoh asks if she isn't going to do her job, she immediately assumes he wants her to sleep on the sofa again so he can have the bed to himself. Instead of answering directly, he asks if she knows how much a non-commissioned officer earns. He explains that a long-term duty master sergeant with 7 years of service makes about 2.5 million won, and even with dispatch allowances, it only reaches 3.5 million won. She quickly tells him she understands his point. Then he asks how much his older sister pays her. When she says it's a similar amount, he clarifies that he isn't talking about the company's salary, but the extra payment she gets for following him around like a goldfish poop. She admits that it's quite a lot. Though she isn't a soldier, she feels like her job constantly puts her life on the line. Still, she agrees to sleep on the sofa, joking that if her back ends up broken, she'll just snap it back together. Before lying down, she reminds him again that tea is better than alcohol. Then she brings up Miss Lee, expressing her anger about what happened to her. Taeoh asks why she's so upset. Seo explains that it's because of the disgusting things Miss Lee went through. Even though she wasn't the victim, she feels deeply affected by the suffering of others. If it had been her, she would have felt even more wronged, but she believes that people don't only get angry over things that happen to them directly. Thinking back, she realizes Taeoh spent 7 years in the military. She suggests that might be why he struggles to sleep. He's rarely had the opportunity to do so alone. Then, unable to hold back her curiosity, she finally asks why he chose to become a soldier. After asking why he chose to be a soldier, Seo continues, saying that if it were her, she wouldn't have joined something as tough as UDT, jokingly calling it the underwear demolition team. Considering that he's a third-generation chaebol, she finds it even more surprising. Then she asks what he would have done if he got unlucky and ended up dead. She tells him to imagine reaching the afterlife without ever getting to spend all his wealth, calling the thought horrifying. Taeoh simply asks if she isn't supposed to be sleeping. She admits that she is, but says she suddenly had this thought one day. He then explains that he joined the military so he could clear his head by pushing his body to its limits. Seo originally assumed he enlisted just so he could legally beat people up, but since she can't say that out loud, she instead tells him she thought he joined because of his noble background and wanted to use his position to help others. She notes that it's rare for nobles to enlist in the military, and with someone like him around, she thinks the future of Korea looks promising. As she speaks, her voice gradually fades, and soon she falls asleep. The next morning, Seo wakes up complaining that her legs hurt. She calls Taeoh mean for making her sleep on the couch twice in a row while he enjoyed the bed. Then she grumbles that he has no sense of duty and wonders what exactly he learned in the military. But as she steps forward, she freezes, realizing too late that he heard everything. Without reacting to her complaints, Taeoh presses the elevator button and tells her they should leave now. Seo watches him in surprise. After all, he's the one pressing the button himself this time. Amused, she wonders if this finally proves her importance. Then, as they head out, she keeps talking. While having breakfast, Seo offers Taeoh some of her mango bingsu, but he declines. Pleased, she happily keeps it all to herself. She then asks if he has any new plans for the day, but he remains silent. Still, she remains cheerful despite his lack of interest in small talk. She suggests that he should keep her employed and asks if he doesn't think they work well together. Taeoh reminds her that she risked her life for the planning department assignment, but she downplays it. She explains that she never saw the need to put her life on the line for a promotion. As long as someone is satisfied with their position, life can still be fulfilling. Taeoh comments that she seems to be living such a life, and she thanks him. Then she talks about being his driver. He points out that she could earn even more as a personal driver. She agrees and jokes that she could conquer the world with such a job, when suddenly, they are approached by Miss Lee's father. Taeoh immediately asks about Miss Lee's condition. Her father thanks him, saying that his daughter is recovering. Then, he turns to Seo, acknowledging that she played a huge role in helping his daughter. However, Seo modestly denies it, saying she didn't do much. Taeoh, on the other hand, states that she actually did a lot. Seo insists that her contribution was merely a drop in the ocean compared to his efforts. Regardless, the man expresses his gratitude to both of them and also addresses Taeoh as Sergeant Jin Taeoh. He then comments that he knew Taeoh would find his daughter. Taeoh, however, regrets not finding her sooner. The man takes responsibility, admitting that it was his own failure for not looking after his daughter properly. Curious about how the father plans to handle Young, Taeoh asks him directly. The man replies that he will let the law take its course. He also reflects on his own mistakes, saying that if he had reported his daughter missing earlier, she might have avoided the worst outcome. Then he offers Taeoh some advice. He says that there are many important things in life: fame, fortune, power, health, family, friends, and even personal beliefs. However, the most crucial thing is to never lose sight of one's true priority. He warns Taeoh not to make the same mistake he did. Changing the subject, he asks how Taeoh is adjusting to civilian life. Observing him closely, he comments that Taeoh seems to be doing better than expected. Taeoh replies that it's not bad. However, the man then brings up something unexpected. He recalls how Taeoh was discharged safely instead of ending up in a military prison, despite nearly beating his superior mercilessly. Seo freezes in shock. She turns to look at Taeoh, unable to believe what she just heard. Is the man sitting beside her really the same person he's talking about? Enjoying this recap so far? Comment Part 2 below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao!